Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with my spoiler-free review for The Memory of Babel by Christelle Dabos, translated by Hildegarde Serle. I received this copy in exchange for a free and honest review, so thank you so much to Europa Editions. And as with all of my reviews, I will have content warnings listed in the description box, and I do want to mention in particular for this book, quite a few of the ones that I mention are related to specific language used in the text, and I want to mention that that might be due to some quirks of the translation, because I was reading reviews from people who read different translations or comments that they had left in other reviews, and they did not have some of those same issues. So do keep that in mind if you are looking at those content warnings. And as I said, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, and when I say that, I mean this is not going to spoil anything that happens in this book. It might refer to some things that are spoilers for books 1 and 2, so if you haven't yet read those, I will link my spoiler-free reviews for both of those down below. Even if you haven't started the series, you could watch either of those reviews and be okay. And in those reviews, I also go into a lot more detail about the premise and kind of the setup for the story. So in this installment in the series, we're at a new location, and that is Babel, and we're actually following Ophelia more or less by herself. She does end up meeting some friends or allies along the way, but it's mainly about her trying to unravel some mysteries about Babel, some information that she thinks she has that might be pointing to Babel as having some kind of information about this overarching mystery they are trying to solve. And she's also trying to figure out where Thorn is, so she's kind of trying to figure out both of these things, and a lot of things that happen from there. So I'm going to jump right into the things I really liked. I love Thorn as a character so much. I love his and Ophelia's dynamic. I actually wish we had gotten even more scenes with them, because I just love the way that they play off of each other. And it's really cool because, like, I remember when we first met him in book 1, I was not a fan of his at all. But through his development in that book, and especially in the second book, I have just come to love him so much. He's like one of my favorite characters. Like, I just really enjoy all of his and Ophelia's scenes together. Another huge plus for this book is just something that I think has been great throughout the series, and that is just how incredibly creative the world building of this book is, or of this series is. Like, Christelle Dabos has such an amazing imagination for the way she constructs these settings and their backstory and their history, and the lore of this world. It's just super interesting, and I really enjoyed exploring Babel and getting to see this new location. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, because I actually really liked the scenes that were set on the pole, so I was kind of not sure how I was going to like this, but I really ended up enjoying the setting. As far as the plot goes, I think that the mysteries were pretty compelling throughout, in the sense that I cared when we made progress on them, and I did feel compelled to keep reading and to figure out, like, if we were going to get any answers for these things. I will get into some things I didn't love as much about the plot in a minute, but I did find this a very compelling book. Also, as a side note, I really appreciate that there's a kind of summary, like, couple of pages at the beginning of this one, at the beginning of this book, where they recall some of the big things that happened in the second book. I really appreciate that, and I think more series should do that. I also really loved some of the side characters that we met in this book. I think just the side characters in general have been really well done throughout this series. There are some that I really love, and I was really fascinated by some of the ones that we met in this book, and especially how, like, first impressions are not always correct, and I really liked the way that that was done. I also want to mention a few things about this book that are tropes or elements I normally don't like, but that I think were done really well in this book and that made sense, because I think that's always really impressive, is when a book can do things you don't like in a way that you're okay with or that you even enjoy. One is that we got some kind of extra point of view chapters throughout this book, and I actually found those really interesting. Like, the perspective was a really interesting one. I don't want to give away who the perspective is, but I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a really great way to give us kind of a different view on the developing plot, and I think it did help move some elements of the story along, and I just found it really interesting. And if you had described the point of view to me, I probably would have guessed I wouldn't like it, but I thought it was actually really interesting. Another thing I was really impressed about is this book does the split up the two main characters thing, but it didn't bother me. I think, like, the plot and the mystery was so, not fast-paced necessarily, but so, like, compelling throughout the book that even though I really wanted to find Thorn and I really wanted him and Ophelia to be reunited, it didn't ruin the book for me, like, waiting for them to find each other again. And I think partly that's because I sort of knew what to expect from that regarding this book, and I think another part of that is just because, again, the story itself was really engaging, even if we didn't have Thorn and Ophelia together for a lot of it. And also related to the two leads, I think this book pulled off the, not miscommunication trope exactly, but, like, characters not talking about their feelings properly. And I think the reason it works so well is because it's very on brand for both of their characters. Like, it definitely makes sense why they would do this, and so even though it was sometimes frustrating, I think it made sense, and that kept it from being something that really, really annoyed me. Okay, so I really liked a lot of things throughout this book, but I do want to touch on some of the things that I didn't love quite as much. One of them is something I have mentioned in, I think, both of my previous reviews, and that is that the main overarching story of this series is not as compelling as the other stuff going on, at least to me. Like, I find the character dynamics and the world building and, like, for example, the court intrigue of book 2, I find all of those things much, much more interesting and engaging than kind of the overall mystery about like what is going on in this world and like who the big bad guy is and who's like pulling the strings and controlling everything and trying to figure out who this person is. I don't find that nearly as interesting as the other stuff going on. So that might be a personal preference thing. I don't know how other reviewers feel about that aspect, but I just think that the parts with the characters and the world building and the more like small scale conflict, I guess, even though it's still pretty like far-reaching consequences, I find that the conflict and the plot that is not related to this huge mystery and this huge villain, I find that stuff a lot more interesting. And especially as we're getting into this third book, the main part of this book is figuring out that main mystery. So I think also that might be part of why some of the plot elements didn't work for me as well here, is because we didn't have as much other stuff going on like we did in the previous couple of books. And then also related to the plot, it's just getting really, really convoluted. Like the mysteries and the reveals and just like the plot in general as it relates to this series long plot and mystery, it's getting very, very hard to follow. And it's weird because like I mentioned earlier, like some of the reveals themselves I found interesting and that I was compelled to keep reading. I wanted to know the answers to things, but it's like that satisfaction was there, but the like actual investment in what these developments mean wasn't there, if that makes sense. And like I did mention that there's the summary at the beginning of this book, which I do really appreciate. I wish that it had been more detailed though, because there were some references to things that I did not even remember happening in the previous 2 books that were pretty important developments. And I also want to say it's definitely possible that I just didn't remember those. Generally, I'm really good at remembering developments between books in a series, but it is definitely possible that I just didn't do as well with this one because of how convoluted the plot is. So this might be like me as the reader. But I do think that when it comes to like keeping track of this massive plot and making sure that the reader is reminded of the important things they need to know, I think like some of that is down to the reader, but I also think that at least some of that responsibility is on the writer and in how they kind of remind you of aspects of the plot as you go through the book. And then also a quick plot note, there was a reveal at the end of this book that was pretty important for this novel specifically, and I felt like that was kind of out of nowhere. Like I was glad to have it resolved, but the answer to me didn't make a lot of sense, or it didn't feel like it had been foreshadowed quite enough. Like there was a little bit, but not much. Just the way that was done, it felt very out of nowhere, like I said. And then the only other kind of negative thing about this book for me is Ophelia herself. I didn't dislike her, but compared to books 1 and 2, where I really, really enjoyed her character and her character development, I just felt kind of neutral about her in this one. And I don't think it was because, she was really like focused on finding Thorn. That didn't bother me because I also wanted to find Thorn. I think maybe that the reason I didn't find her quite as compelling is because so much of this book was focused on like her finding things out and her powers and abilities and like her tracking down these like bits of the mystery and like memories and everything. Like so much of her story was centered on the plot that even though she's alone for quite a big portion of this book, it doesn't feel like a very introspective story. Like I don't feel like we actually spent a lot of time kind of getting to know her character more, or even just like remembering the things that we love about her character. Like it kind of felt like she was always running around and trying to like solve things, which in a way is great. Like I really love that she had such an active part in the plot here, but I think that there maybe could have been more balance between that and more like character moments with her, I think, because again, I didn't dislike her in this book, but I just felt pretty neutral about her, whereas in books 1 and 2 I actually really liked her and especially really enjoyed how her character developed. So yeah, that was kind of a disappointment as well. But overall, I did still really, really enjoy this book. It's not my favorite in the series. I gave The Memory of Babel 3.75 stars, but I still think it's a really solid entry in the series. As I said, there were quite a few things I liked about it. It's just that this one, as compared with the others, there were a couple of things that brought this one down for me a little bit. But again, still really enjoyed it. So please comment down below and let me know if you have read The Memory of Babel, what you thought of it, or if you're going to pick it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!